A long time ago, in a calm little village called Zubara, there lived a young man named Tenga. Tenga was unlike the rest of his large family. He was the only boy among a sea of sisters, more than anyone could count on two hands. They adored him like the morning sun, and he loved them just as fiercely. But none of them knew that time was quietly shaping a darkness within him. When Tenga turned 25, it was time to leave. In Zubara, once a boy became a man, he could no longer stay in his parents' home. It was the village way. So, with a small sack over his shoulder and hope dancing in his eyes, Tenga hugged his family goodbye and began walking toward a far-off town. His heart beat with dreams of gold, soft silks, and meals that never ended. The path before him twisted like a long serpent through hills, streams, and whispering trees, leading him toward a place that sparkled in his imagination like polished cowrie shells. With every step, Tenga murmured under his breath, "I'll return rich. Just wait." When he finally stepped into the great town of Betrayal, it felt like stepping into another world. The houses stood tall like ancient baobab trees, and the roads were alive with the rumble of carts, chatter, and footsteps. But the city didn't welcome him with open arms. Tenga tried every job he could find. He swept floors, carried heavy sacks, and even shined shoes by the roadside. But luck refused to follow him. Sometimes he earned a few coins, just enough, for a crust of dry yam or a small meat pie. Most nights his belly cried louder than the crickets, and when the sky turned dark, Tenga had no place to rest his head. He slept under mango trees, beside noisy roads or under old bridges. One day by the bus station, the next by the smelly edge of the fish market. Still, he kept going. Every morning he'd dust off the dirt, look up at the sky and whisper, "Today will be different." Then came a day that changed everything. As he wandered the winding streets of Betrayal, hungry and tired, Tenga spotted a massive poster outside a shining white compound. The compound looked like a palace, with walls so high they could catch clouds. The poster read, "Help wanted. Apply inside." His heart thudded like a drum in a festival. This is it, he thought. Without waiting a moment, he hurried to the tall bronze gate and knocked boldly. After a pause, the gate creaked open. A calm-looking woman stood there. Her clothes were clean and expensive, and she carried herself like someone who had never known hunger. Without a word, she motioned him in. Tenga followed her through a garden full of hibiscus flowers, papaya trees, and the scent of roasted spices. In the center of the compound sat a man, relaxed, sharp-eyed, and powerful. This was Baraka, the wealthiest man in Betrayal. Everyone knew his name. But more than his riches, people whispered about his strange habits. You see, Baraka didn't employ men. Not for cooking, not for driving, not even for guarding his gates. Every worker under his roof was a woman, graceful, obedient, and quiet. But Tenga didn't know this. He stepped forward, full of hope, and said, "Please, sir, I'm looking for work." Baraka tilted his head, gave a dry chuckle, and replied, "I don't employ men. My rule, only women work in this house." Tenga's face dropped. His voice stuttered. He had come too far to walk away with nothing. Quickly, he straightened his back and said, "Sir, I have many sisters in Zubara. If you won't hire me, maybe I can bring them instead." Baraka raised one brow, intrigued. He stroked his chin, then gave a sly smile. "If you bring your sisters," Baraka said slowly, "I'll hire them. And for every sister you bring, I'll give you half of her wages. That way you earn without doing anything at all." Tenga's eyes sparkled. This was more than he could have asked for. Money without effort, and a way to help his sisters too. He nodded eagerly. "Yes, sir, I'll bring them to you," he promised, not even thinking to ask what kind of work they'd be doing. As he walked away, Tenga's mind raced. "This is it," he told himself, his chest puffed out. "Now I will show everyone in Zubara that I'm truly rich." The very next day, Tenga returned to his village, but this time, he didn't walk through the dusty path like a poor traveler. He arrived in a rented car that gleamed like polished coconut shells. wearing borrowed clothes that screamed wealth, shiny shoes, crisp agbada, and gold-colored rings. The people of Zubara gathered quickly. Their jaws dropped. Could this truly be the same Tenga who left with only a sack and a dream? He stood proudly, grinning from ear to ear. "I bring good news," he shouted, his voice deep and bold. "I've built a great business in Bakare, a company of high class and success." Gasps and murmurs filled the air like bees in a field. Tenga's father beamed. His mother clutched her wrapper in joy. The neighbors whispered with pride. And his sisters? They looked at him with wide eyes, full of wonder. He raised his arms like a hero. "I want my sisters to come and work for me," he declared. "They will have powerful roles, earn fine salaries, and ride in beautiful cars. Our family will be respected from here to the mountains." The villagers clapped. Heads nodded. Some ululated. No one questioned anything. Not even once did they ask what kind of work the sisters would do. And Tenga didn't tell. He smiled, soaked in praise, already thinking about the wealth that would soon be his. Wealth that would come from those who trusted him most. With dreams shining in their eyes, no one in Zubara doubted a word Tenga said. The villagers believed every syllable like it was carved from sacred stone. "Do not worry," Tenga said, his voice smooth as honey. "Your daughters are in safe hands. They'll bring wealth and honor back to Zubara." And just like that, he won them all over. The village buzzed with songs and smiles. Pride filled every home. His sisters packed their clothes with joy, dreaming of the bright future ahead. They imagined offices with fans, fine dresses, and their own rooms in a beautiful house. Tenga, behind his charming smile, carried a secret. A truth darker than any night. But no one saw it. When he returned to Baraka's estate, two of his sisters walked beside him, hopeful and excited. Their eyes widened as they passed through the tall gates, the walls towering above them like palace towers. The flowers bloomed sweetly, and they thought they had arrived at a paradise, a place of honor, a place of work. But Tenga didn't ask what jobs they'd do. He didn't want to know. He only cared about the promise, the payment for each girl. Baraka waited with that same quiet, cunning grin. He didn't say much, just nodded toward the house. The girls followed the servants inside, smiling nervously. Tenga didn't even blink. He stretched out his hand like a merchant. Baraka dropped a thick wad of notes into his palm, more money than Tenga had ever touched in his entire life. His heart raced with greed. He tucked the money into his bag, turned around, and left. Bidad, he returned to Zubara. He brought back gifts, sacks of food, strings of shiny coins, things that glittered in the sunlight and drew curious eyes. He called the villagers together. "Look," he said, holding up the gifts. "Your daughters sent this from Bakare. They are doing well, better than we even hoped. And this is only the beginning." Gasps filled the air. Mothers cried with joy. Fathers patted his back. No one asked where the food truly came from. No one dared. With their trust wrapped around him like a cloak, Tenga's plan rolled forward. He had delivered his sisters, and his mind was already racing toward the next batch. With the success of the first visit, he became a star in Zubara. His name was praised in homes, his story told at fire pits. The villagers beamed with pride. Soon, other families came to him. "Please," they said, "take my daughter too. Let her have a chance like yours. Let her shine." Tenga smiled, nodding, politely. But in his heart, he only saw money. He returned to Bakare with 4 girls, 2 more of his sisters and 2 from neighboring homes. The girls giggled with excitement, dressed in their finest wrappers, thinking of jobs and new lives. But when they reached Baraka's estate, the truth stayed buried. Tenga didn't even ask if they were well. He dropped them off at the gates, didn't look back, and walked straight to Baraka's hand. And once again, Baraka delivered piles of crisp bills, clean, sweet-smelling notes that made Tenga's smile grow like a fat moon. Each trip, his pockets grew heavier. He now wore fine clothes, rings on his fingers, sandals with gold trim. And still, not once did he ask what kind of work the girls were doing. Not once did he visit his sisters. As long as the money flowed, nothing else mattered. Back in Zubara, Tenga became a living legend. The young boys admired him. The elders praised him. Women whispered about how wise he was. Everyone believed the daughters were living well in Bakare, running businesses, dressing richly, riding in cars. And Tenga? He felt like a king. He dreamed of more girls, more trips, more riches. Days passed, then weeks, then months. But the village began to grow quiet. Mothers stared at empty beds. Fathers stood by the door at dusk, waiting for a knock that never came. The laughter of girls, once like music in the air, had gone still. Then came the questions. Why haven't they written? Why don't they visit, even just for a day? But when they asked Tenga, he smiled gently and replied, "They're learning new skills. They're busy, but soon they will return, and they will bring even more blessings." To calm their hearts, he always came back with gifts. Yams stacked high, coins in leather pouches, colorful cloths, cooking oil. "Your daughters sent this," he would say, his eyes shining. "They want you to have these while they work hard for our future." The villagers took the gifts with trembling hands, smiled through their fear, convinced themselves that silence meant success. But as the days dragged on, unease crept into Zubara like a slow wind. Late at night, the villagers began to whisper, "Could they truly be that busy? Why haven't we heard a word?" Even those who had once cheered now sat with wrinkled brows. Some mothers cried quietly, hiding their tears beneath their wrappers. But Tenga had learned how to cover doubt. Each time suspicion rose like a wave, he drowned it with wealth. He returned with bigger sacks, shinier things, more coins, and his words. Oh, they were sweet as mangoes. "They are doing well. Just wait. You'll be proud." And so, the people told themselves to trust, to believe. But deep in their hearts, a small ember of fear began to glow. A fear they could not name, but one that would not go away. And while the villagers tried to silence that worry, Tenga danced through his lies, blinded by coins, drunk on praise. He did not see the storm building behind him, because inside Baraka's mansion, behind the tall walls and beautiful gardens, the truth was darker than anyone dared imagine. The truth inside Baraka's mansion was a nightmare dressed in silk. He had promised the girls jobs, roles that sounded clean and respectable. But what awaited them behind those tall walls was something far more terrifying. Each night, men dressed in fine robes and golden chains arrived at the estate. They were wealthy, powerful, and cruel. The girls were forced to serve them in ways they never imagined, ways no decent soul would choose. They weren't employees. They were prisoners, locked away, controlled, threatened. Whenever a girl tried to escape, Baraka's guards would seize her, drag her back through the corridors, and the next day, she'd be gone. No one knew where. The others whispered in corners. Fearful guesses passed from trembling lips. Maybe he ended her. Everyone feared it. The message was loud and clear. Disobedience meant vanishing forever. One night, Lami, one of Tenga's own sisters, spotted something. A crack in the wooden door. Barely wide enough for a hand. But it was enough. Her heart pounded like talking drums. Loud, urgent, wild. She turned to the other girls sitting around her. Their faces were pale, their eyes tired. "Come," she whispered. "This may be our only chance." But the others shook their heads slowly. "No, Lami," one girl said with a broken voice. "He'll find us, he always does." Lami's eyes glistened with tears, but she understood. The fear that gripped them was heavy. Still, she couldn't wait. With trembling fingers, Lami slipped through the crack. the cold breeze of freedom brushing her cheeks for the first time in months. She crept along the back path, step by step, light as a feather, silent as a hunted animal. And then she ran. She ran with the wind, her feet pounding the earth like the beat of warriors' feet in battle. She didn't know where to go. The streets of Betrayal were endless. They twisted and coiled like the snakes in the grass. She was small, alone, hungry, lost, but she kept moving, with no food, no friends, and no direction. Lami wandered. Days passed. She clutched her chest every time she saw a guard, a gate, a black car. Still, she didn't stop. Back at the mansion, Baraka's calm shattered when he found out. He summoned Tenga, the merchant of lies. Baraka's face was colder than death. "One of your sisters is gone," he said sharply. "Lami, find her or your payments stop. You made a deal." Tenga's heart jumped in his chest. He couldn't lose everything. Not the money, not the status, not the praise. He rushed into the city, shouting her name, begging strangers, desperation dripping from his tongue. He searched alleys, markets, parks, and for days, until one evening he spotted her. There she was, and sitting on the dusty steps of a police station, her hair tangled, her dress torn, her body tired. "Lami," he shouted, relief, anger, shame, all swirling in his voice. Lami looked up slowly. Her eyes were swollen from tears. She blinked, disbelieving, then sobbed. She fell to her knees. "Brother," she whispered, her voice shaking. "You don't know what's happening in there. Baraka, he's not a man. He's a beast." Tears rolled down her cheeks. Her voice broke. "He locks us up. He brings rich men every night. We're not workers. We're prisoners. We're forced to do terrible things." Tenga's face drained of color. He looked away, clenched his jaw. But then he remembered. The warning, the promise, the deal. He had sworn silence. If he broke it, everything would disappear, like smoke blown away by the wind. He stared at her and hardened. Without saying a word, he reached down and pulled Lami to her feet. "We're going back," he said, cold as stone. Lami's eyes widened. "No," she cried, pulling back. "You don't understand. If you take me back, he'll kill me, like the others." But Tenga didn't listen. Greed had drowned the brother inside him. He held her wrist tighter. "Please," she begged. "Please, Tenga, don't take me back there." But her cries faded into the night, and Tenga walked with his head low, and his mind fixed, dragging her back to Baraka's gates. What he didn't know was that Lami had already told the truth. Before he found her, while she waited at the police station, Lami had spoken to the officers. She had told them everything. She told them how girls were promised good jobs but instead locked up and used. She told them how escape meant punishment, maybe even death. She painted the picture of Baraka's mansion with words heavy as stones, but she had left one thing out: Tenga's name. She didn't speak of her brother, not because he didn't deserve it, but because she still hoped. Hoped he would change. Hoped he would one day choose her life over his coins. And she feared that if he knew, he might silence her himself. Tenga was too far gone, caught in Baraka's web, his eyes too blinded by shine, his heart buried under gold. So she kept quiet, hoping the police would act before it was too late. Tenga, on the other hand, thought he had fixed everything. He had done as Baraka asked. He had brought Lami back, and so he felt proud. He believed the river of coins would keep flowing. He believed his secret was still hidden deep beneath the soil. But Lami had already planted a seed, and the earth was beginning to shake. It began like a single crack in a dam. The police, having listened to Lami's quiet truth, now had their eyes on Baraka's twisted empire. And while Tenga kept walking blindly through his golden illusion, thinking his life was safe and secured, the truth was already rising like a flood, ready to break everything apart. As Tenga dragged Lami back to Baraka's mansion, something strange caught his eye. From a distance, the front gate, usually closed like a fortress, and now stood wide open, and scattered outside were police vans. Uniformed officers marched across the courtyard, their boots thudding against the stone, their voices loud and sharp. Tenga froze. His blood ran cold. When he stepped closer, his heart dropped to his stomach. There stood Baraka, no longer proud or smug. His wrists were chained, his head bowed, his eyes burning with fear. He was surrounded by officers, stripped of his power and pride. Inside the mansion, doors flew open, locks were broken, hidden rooms were revealed, and from the shadows, girls began to emerge, one by one, tired, terrified, but free. Some wept as they stepped into the light. Others looked around, stunned, unsure if this was a dream. But not all the girls were found, and that truth stung like a spear. An officer stepped forward, his voice hard. "Where are the others?" he demanded. Baraka stammered. I don't know. Others. His words trailed off. His eyes darted like a cornered animal. The officer's face tightened with disgust, and Tenga's heart pounded like thunder. The truth stood before him now, raw and undeniable. He had brought his sisters here, his own blood. He had never asked what work they'd do. He had never cared to know. Before he could speak, before a single excuse could leave his mouth, hands grabbed him. The cold touch of metal circled his wrists. "You're under arrest," an officer said sharply. "You helped him, you took money, and you stayed silent." Tenga stuttered, trying to defend himself. I didn't know." But his words were weak, and everyone could see it. Guilt dripped from his eyes. Regret flooded his face, but it was too late. Together, he and Baraka were marched away, their steps heavy, their heads down, and behind them, the girls, including Lami, were wrapped in blankets and led gently away by the officers. In that moment, the dark kingdom Baraka had built crumbled like dust, and Tenga, once the shining pride of Zubara, became nothing more than a man in chains, trapped by his own greed and betrayal. When word reached Zubara, it spread like wildfire. First, the villagers were confused, shocked. No one wanted to believe it. Tenga, our Tenga, the one who brought gifts? No, it can't be true. But the truth cannot stay hidden forever. When the full story emerged, the village shook with rage and sorrow. The girls hadn't been working. They hadn't found honor or pride. They had been imprisoned, used, hurt, lied to. Everything Tenga had told them, the stories of success, the riches, the joy, it was all a lie. Mothers wailed openly, collapsing into each other's arms. Fathers stood still, fists clenched, eyes filled with storm. They remembered every time Tenga returned in fake glory, with his shiny clothes, his smooth talk, his fake smiles. And now, they saw it for what it was. A mask, a performance. Every bag of rice, every shiny coin, every fine wrapper, it was all poisoned with betrayal. One by one, they put the puzzle together, and the image that formed broke their hearts. "He lied to us," the people whispered, their voices shaking. "He used our daughters. He sold his own sister and her money." Zubara, once filled with songs of pride for their son, now carried a silence so heavy it pressed down like rain clouds. The people turned away from Tenga's memory and made a vow. They would never trust so blindly again. In the end, justice found them both. Baraka, the mastermind, and Tenga, the betrayer, stood before the court. And the court gave them life behind bars, for every tear they caused, for every life they ruined, for every silence they forced. They would spend the rest of their days inside cold concrete walls, left with nothing but the pain they had caused others. Back in Zubara, the surviving girls finally returned home. They were thinner, quieter, eyes older than their years, but they were alive. Their families met them with trembling hands, hugs soaked in tears, and the aching need to apologize for what they didn't know. The girls did not speak much. They didn't need to. Their presence alone was a story of pain, survival, and strength. The village gathered in the square. The elders rose, their faces grim, their voices steady. "We must learn from this," one of them said. "Not every smile is honest. Not every success is true. We must protect our own, not with blind trust, but with wisdom." And the people nodded. That story would be passed down, not as gossip, but as a warning, to their children and their children's children. Meanwhile, inside a cold, gray prison, Tenga sat alone. The walls around him were tight, but the real prison was inside his heart. He remembered their faces, his sisters, his parents, the villagers. He remembered Lami's tears, the way her voice cracked, the way she begged. He remembered what he chose instead, and that memory never left him. At night, it visited him like a ghost, reminding him of what he had done, the smiles he destroyed, the trust he shattered, the home he lost. Tenga had chased riches, but what he gained was emptiness. And back in Zubara, his story remained, not as a song, but as a warning carved into the hearts of all. Greed can blind the soul, but truth always finds its way.